Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the William Bonney podcast. Today I thought I'd have a look at a murder that took place in the kitchens at HMP Dartmoor. The reason I've had a look at this, I wasn't there at the time. There was an inquest reopened again earlier on this year to have a look at the circumstances around and how it actually happened between these two inmates. I used to work in the kitchen, so I thought this would be a great subject for us to have a quick podcast about today. So I can give you some of the insight about the actual layout of the kitchen and how this possibly could have occurred, and also how two violent inmates were left together unsupervised with knives, and then one of them ended up tragically losing their life. So yeah, today I thought I'd have a look at some of the articles that have been written. And then again, some of my own insight into how this could have happened. Now, the incident we're talking about goes back to November 2015, when William Tolcher, a Scouser, and he was a lifer in HMP Dartmoor, stabbed and killed Alexander Cusworth, another prisoner serving 8 years. For a violent offence against his landlord. Now, William, known as Scouse Billy, was in for murdering his girlfriend, Catherine Sharples, a lady from, it happened in a flat in Newquay in 1996, so quite a while ago. Now, neither of these lads, like I say, were innocent. They're both in there for violence. They've both got victims who... they were both the real victims in this. But then you end up sending these two violent people to prison, and you end up putting them in a room together with weapons of death. So there's obviously massive failings on the prison side, because as routine as this may be, when I was in the kitchens, it was always quite normal for the kitchen cupboard to be open up. You go and get the knives that you might need. So the lads making sandwiches would have knives. The lads cutting up vegetables would have knives. Sometimes you'd have chicken legs and things coming in that needed to be prepared. Those lads would all have knives. It's a CCAT establishment, so everyone's relatively trusted. But this guy's a lifer from 1996, so he was on his way down through the kind of the categories. So at some point he must have been deemed fit to be in Dartmoor and to be working his way towards a CCAT. He's been in there quite a while at this point. So it's not unusual that this would have happened, but occasionally, you put the wrong two people in the room together and this happens. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sort of read out verbatim. We've got the Liverpool Echo here, obviously, because like I say, William was from Liverpool, nicknamed Scouse Billy. A Liverpool man could die in jail after he was convicted of killing fellow prisoner who he accused of disrespecting him, his second murder within 20 years. William Tolcher wielded a 10-inch knife used to chop vegetables when he singled out fellow lag Alexander Cusworth in the food preparation area of HMP Dartmoor in November 2015. Today he was convicted of murdering the 37-year-old and was warned by the judge he may spend the rest of his life behind bars. I've read another article where it says he got 33 years, another life sentence with 33 years added on. It follows the murder of Catherine Sharples in Newquay in 1996. The 51-year-old stabbed the councillor's son after a dispute between the two men in Plymouth Crown Court. Plymouth Crown Court was told. Now, Alex Cusworth seems to have had quite a troubled life. He was, abused and this councillor, a Conservative MP, I think, or a Conservative councillor, adopted him and took him on and tried her best to kind of keep him on the straight and narrow, but he was kind of let down. He was one of those kind of people that seems to have fallen through the system and was let down everywhere. But he, like myself, everyone makes their own choices and everyone has their own excuses. But it's kind of what you do with those. You always make the choice to commit a crime or not. So it's the circumstances around your life obviously a factor to you committing crime, but it's not the leverage in a lot of circumstances. So yeah, this counsellor was trying her best to help Alex, but she couldn't. It seems she couldn't. And we're going to read some more about some articles because she spoke at length about how it's affected her and the conditions he was living in Dartmoor. Yeah, the 51-year-old stabbed the counsellor's son after a dispute between the two men, Plymouth Crown Court was told. As he walked away from the fatally wounded Cusworth from Baswich, Staffordshire, Tolcher said, "You won't fucking talk to me like that." Then he walked to a different part of the kitchen and told another inmate, "I've just fucked up. I've just fucked up big. I've stuck a 10-inch blade into Alex." Now that seems quite specific. I don't know if you'd say that you'd stuck a 10-inch blade into him, or if you'd just say that you'd stuck a blade in someone. Judge Mr. Justice Dingmans imposed another life sentence and told Tolcher he may serve at least 33 years before he can apply for parole. He told him the parole board may never consider you fit for release. "I'm sure you are an extremely dangerous man because you have been convicted of murdering 2 persons. You are a complete stranger to the truth and willing to say anything to anyone in an attempt to manipulate proper processes and secure your release. This is a very sad case. It was a murder for no good reason by a person who has shown he is a killer and acts without remorse. Mr. Cusworth, 37, of Teignmouth, was in Dartmoor serving 8 years, a term for grievous bodily harm." Now, I've tried to find the article about his crime, but all I could find was that it was he was beaten. He got 8 years for beating his landlord with a broomstick, a crime which saw his landlord nearly beaten to death. The injuries were quite bad. So, Alex wasn't an innocent guy. And as much as his, adopted mum would kind of plead that he's a victim of the system and, everyone let him down, he made his own choice to do that. He may have suffered with anger issues, like, I suffer with anger issues, but I've never beaten anyone to death with a broomstick. Hammers, maybe, no. But it's, it seems, these two are obviously, like I say, not innocent parties completely. Going back to the article again, it says, in a moving victim impact statement, his mum, Anne, said, "My son was failed by every establishment in the country. He was a very vulnerable young man with mental health issues, whose biggest desire in life was to live a normal life." Now, he was 37. I'm 39. He's just committed that crime where he's beaten his landlord with a broomstick. Now, I have I have the kind of landlord that makes the national press for how bad he is. I've wanted to beat him to death with a broomstick before, but I've never actually done it. We're all here making choices. You can't say that he's let down by systems when he's making the choice to do these things. And his biggest desire was to live a normal life. My biggest desire is to live a normal life, and I just choose not to beat people with a broomstick. His mum goes on to say, "Alex, I'm very, very sorry. I was not there to protect you when you needed it the most." The jury rejected Tolcher's claim that he'd been framed by a top dog inside the Moorland jail. The Liverpudlian had previously admitted causing actual bodily harm in an attack on a prisoner in 2003. The knife used to kill Mr. Cusworth cut through a rib and passed through the bottom of his kidney and a large vein. He died in hospital from blood loss and heart failure. Gosh. Tolcher was arrested later in the jail, but in 3 police interviews he made no comment. So it does seem that there was 3 members of staff on at the time, and also there's no CCTV in the kitchens, so there wouldn't have been any cameras showing the event. And the 3 civilian members of staff that work in the kitchens, they will have some prison staff training. They do hold keys. They can come and get you off the wing, but they don't obviously have keys to cells and things like this. They're not prison officers. They're not there to restrain you or do anything like that, but they will ring the alarm and get other officers down. They do work for the prison. They're not just complete civvies. So I can believe that they didn't see it, because the way the kitchen's set up, and hopefully through the wonders of science there'll be on the screen a little map now of the kitchen that I've drawn from my memory. And if they were in the vegetable preparation area, they would have been standing in an area around here, and it would have been easy because the office is fairly close to there. But if the 3 members of staff were off cooking, they would have had their backs turned. They would have been off somewhere else. Quite regularly, there would have been one of those members of staff would be in the storeroom, and then 2 of them could have been cooking quite easily. So it would have been impossible for them to see or hear it. They would have, if someone had seen or heard it, they would have said something. They're not the kind of people that would just be scared to give a statement. The majority of the kitchen staff when I worked there, and they're probably the same staff who work there now, because these people tend to work there for like 30 years. They're all ex-Navy. So again, they're used to establishment, they're used to protocol, they're not scared easily. So yeah, I believe them when they say they didn't see anything. But it does seem odd, doesn't it? In a modern day and age, they still don't have cameras in every area of the prison, just to kind of back up, and because you've got hundreds of offenders in there, always up to no good, always trying to do something and get one over on the system, and you've got no way of sort of checking up and watching over them. But so yeah, these lads would have been working in the vegetable preparation area here, and you normally kind of stand back to back. Some will be working on one side, another group of lads will be working on the other, maybe 3 or 4 on each side, and they would have access to sharp knives, because they'd either be chopping up meat or they'd be chopping up veg in that area. And like I say, you're working in close quarters. It would be quite easy for someone to take the piss. Banter is quite a lot in jail. It's quite regular within a group. And within prison, there's always this kind of pecking order where people are constantly kind of pecking at each other to kind of see top dog in each other and things. Everybody knows who the hardest people in there are, and then underneath them, it's a kind of a free for all to kind of who falls in line, for 5th and 6th place, and and 10th and 11th and things like this. And Alex was seen as a bit of a runt, it seems, and this guy, obviously being a Scouser and a lifer, he didn't like the fact that this runt might have given him a bit of stick, or a bit of said something about him, because let's face it, Scouse Billy, he's in there for beating up his missus and killing his partner. So Catherine Sharples, like I say, back in 1996, was found dead in her flat in Newquay. She was from up north. I found this article in the Bolton News .co.uk. Let's have a quick look at this one. A Falmouth woman has been found battered to death in a flat in a popular Cornish resort. Devon and Cornwall Murder Squad detectives have launched a massive manhunt for the vicious killer of Catherine Sharples. Detectives are travelling north later to do interview relatives and friends in Bolton and Manchester. The 43-year-old woman was found face down in the bedroom of her flat in Newquay. A post-mortem revealed that she had been beaten around the head several times with a blunt, heavy instrument. News of Catherine's murder has stunned relatives, including her brother Stephen and his wife. They are absolutely devastated by the murder. Let's have a look. Forensic tests have been carried out on Catherine's disability benefit book, which was found dumped on a wasteland after £69 was withdrawn from it on Monday. It was found in an envelope. So yeah, this turned out to be William, Scouse Billy's murder. He did this, and then he was caught and convicted for it and given a life sentence. Now, again, I've done videos before about sort of northerners coming down to Newquay and things, and it seems to be a bit of a magnet for them. But they bring their vicious crimes down with them, and yeah, so he was in prison for that, and it seems like he's obviously worked his way through the system. That article we read before said in 2003 he'd attacked another inmate, but for some reason Scouse Billy had been deemed fit to work his way down to a C cap, and then within a very short time he was put straight into the kitchens. Now, wouldn't you expect a violent offender, a violent lifer especially, to have to at least show his eligibility, unless he'd been working in kitchens before in other prisons. And he said that, because I think William said in an article previously that it had been he'd been suffering with his mental health. So you've got a violent offender who's suffering with his mental health, and then suddenly you put him in a position. Now, there's lots of roles in the kitchen that don't involve knives. You could there's jobs where you basically just fill up on. They've got these massive ovens. A lot of prison food is just literally take out of packets and warm it up. So you'll have patties and pies and sausage rolls and all sorts of pastry things that you just get out and you just put them on a tray. Now, there's other roles where you're just mixing up custard and gravy and things like this. So there was other roles they could have given him within the kitchen that he wouldn't have been using knives. So I don't think they risk assessed him very well. And there could have been a lot of things they could have done to avert that murder. Now, as I mentioned, Alex's mum was a counsellor, and she's obviously very upset about this, and went into there's an article in the Times that I'm going to sort of share on the screen at the moment, saying about it was such a waste of a life, and how she saw the conditions he lived in his cell, because when inmates die in prison, the families quite often come in and they see the cell that their loved one was in when they died, and she came in and she said that the conditions weren't fit for an animal, basically. So I'm going to read another article here from the Express and Star, where his mum, Alex's mum, has talked about his life and kind of what led him to end up being in prison. So she said it's such a waste of a life. Mum's emotional tribute to her murdered son in prison. A community leader has paid tribute to her adopted son after he died in prison following an alleged attack from a fellow inmate. Alex Cusworth, who was 37, had been jailed for 8 years for beating his landlord in Plymouth with a broomstick, almost killing him. But just months into serving this time at Dartmoor, he was fatally wounded with a carving knife in the prison kitchen last Thursday. He died at Derriford Hospital a short time after the incident. Stafford Borough Councillor Anne, who represents the Baswich Ward, adopted Cusworth. Sorry, this reading's terrible, so just moving on the screen. He was born and raised in Stafford and had been looked after by the councillor and her late husband from the age of 9. Alex was doing really well and had been hoping that when he came out of prison he could live a normal life, because he hadn't really had a normal childhood. It was such a needless death and such a waste of life. She'd been due to visit him in prison the weekend before his death. She could hardly speak to him on the telephone after her car had broke down just 4 miles short after completing the journey, meaning she missed her allotted time slot. We spoke on the phone, and the last thing he said to me was, "Don't worry, Mum, it's not your fault." So he'd had a bit of a downer. So you could possibly say that one of the reasons he was maybe a bit on edge, or one of the reasons that he'd maybe not himself and gobbing off to a lifer, was because he'd missed his visit and he was in a kind of broken state. I've said this before in prison, you're dealing with a lot of people who could be emotionally raw. It appears that she lives up in Stafford, up in the north still, so it would have been a long way to come to visit. So he possibly wasn't getting visits very often. And then at the last minute, because you don't know that your visit isn't turning up, and you don't know that your visit isn't coming, so you still go down to the visit room, you line up with everybody else, you go through the searches, you have to put a shirt on to go for a visit, you have to look, smart. You go and sit in the visiting room, and you go and sit on the little table, and then you watch everybody else's family come in and kissing and hugging and stuff, and then you watch the second wave of people coming in with all the kissing and hugging and stuff, and then you still sit there on an empty table, and then a couple of you will be called back because your visitors either didn't make it through the security search or they didn't turn up. I've had both of those circumstances before, and it's pretty rotten to be one of those guys going back to the wing because your visit didn't make it through to the room. So he would have been feeling pretty emotional and pretty down about that, and he wouldn't have been in possibly a great headspace. We already know he's violent, and he nearly beat his landlord to death. So you then put him back to back, or working possibly next to a lifer who's violent, with violent tendencies, and they're both chopping up shit with knives. It seems like Alex has said something and walked away, and then Scouse Billy has followed him and stabbed him once. So it's not even a crazed attack. It's just the once with a big knife. A 10-inch knife is 10 inches is the size of your forearm. That's a big chopping knife. That's one of the big knives you have in your kitchen, and he's gone and put it all the way through him through the back. Let's have a look. The councillor said that they're going to hold a special church service for him on Sunday. He was making such good progress, and I just thought that after nearly 30 years of fighting for him, there was going to be some light at the end of the tunnel. I could see it. He was off drugs, and he was making such good progress. William Tolcher, age 50, has been charged with murdering Cusworth. The fellow prison inmate appeared at Central Devon Magistrates Court in Exeter earlier this week. He's not entered a plea yet. He's going to be remanded in custody. It seems now, I've looked him up, and he's in Broadmoor now. Like I say, he had the life sentence previously for killing his girlfriend, and now he's received another 33 years for killing Alex. He's possibly on the same wing as my uncle in Broadmoor. Who knows? But yeah, that's such a tragic turn of events, and like I say, the way that the kitchen's set up with no CCTV or anything like that, then we'll never truly know who was at blame, who's at fault, and what led to these two men to make such life-changing decisions, and what sparked it. Was it a joke gone wrong? Was it a joke that went too far? That can happen all too often in prison. Or was it just an unstable man thrown in with an unstable other man, and had vicious consequences? So yeah, I've emailed the journalist who wrote the article, because I can't seem to find any outcome to the inquest. I mean, obviously we know what's happened, and I've given my opinion on it, but there doesn't seem to be any official outcome to the inquest. So I've emailed the journalist to see if she can spread some light on this, and there doesn't seem to be any reply at the point of recording this. So I'll let you know. If you're not following me on Instagram, come on over. I do posts every now and then about what's going on in my real life. So yeah, it's William Bonnie838 on Instagram. So come on over and say hello. But yeah, no, thank you very much for listening again. And we'll have a look at more true crime and stuff going on in the news in another episode. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.